Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you a quick update on my conservatory here, and I'm basically going to be bringing it into the summer season, waking up the plants from dormancy. So I'm going to be increasing the temperatures, and I'll just kind of talk about how it's been doing over the winter, how the new things like the extractor fan and things like that have worked, and just giving you a general update. So it's now the middle of March. The spring equinox is just a few days away now. Here in North Scotland there's this huge difference between the few weeks before and after the spring equinox. Before the spring equinox we still have quite short days, and the days are much shorter than the nights, and the light levels are quite weak. But after spring equinox the light levels are pretty good and the days are quite a bit longer than the nights, and that'll just get better as the summer continues. So you can see now we actually have quite bright sunshine today, which is nice. Because we're nearly at the equinox, the sun's already getting stronger, and because I have such a steep roof on my house, you can actually probably see when I look out this window here, that shadow is from my house roof. It's currently 10 o'clock, and because we have such a high roof here, the shadow is covering the entire garden. But after the equinox, at this time of day, that shadow will be much shorter. So the sun's even still quite a bit lower at midday, and so because the roof, and because this is slightly north facing, at midday there's no sun in this conservatory, and this conservatory doesn't get any sun until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But after the equinox we should get sun from midday, and in May and June the sun's so high we actually get the sunshine in the morning, even a little bit here in the conservatory. So the light levels are going to increase drastically. The reason I've kept it so cold is partly to keep the heating costs down, but also because when there's not enough light for the plants and you give them too much warmth, they just become very tall and leggy. So keeping it just that little bit colder helps prevent that. So when it comes to temperatures, I've had this with the heating system, with a thermostat keeping it warm. So this is the radiator. This produces the majority of the heat. When the grow box is on, that also produces quite a bit of heat. I normally have that on during the morning and just past midday, because that's when we get a lot of solar power from our solar panels, which is a southeast facing solar panels. I've currently got it off because it makes quite a lot of noise with the fan, and also the hydroponic system down here makes quite a lot of dripping noise, so I've turned them off. But that produces about 500 watts of heat constantly when it's on. The radiator can produce about 2,500 watts of heat, so that's just about enough to heat the conservatory. What I do is I have this controller here, and I just basically set the thermometer on this. So during the day I've had it at 17 set on this, and at night I've had it set at 12. But because this is on top of the grow box, and there is actually a small heater in the grow box as well, that's about 100 watt. You can see that that white bar there. That heater provides a little bit of heat at night, so it's always about 2 degrees warmer up here than it is in the rest of the conservatory. So it's more like 15 degrees during the day and around about 10 degrees at night. So I also have another thermometer just to keep track of that. So just down here, I keep this at ground level. This isn't the coldest spot in the conservatory, but down here at ground level it gives me a good indication of the temperature. So you can see there it's about 1 degree colder. Because I've got the fan on at the moment, the temperature is a bit more equalised, but at night the temperature is a bit more extreme. I also can keep an eye on the humidity, because I did have humidity problems in here before, but with the installation of this extractor fan up here, that solved most of my humidity issues. So I've got a timer set up here. Currently comes on twice a day, once in the morning, other time in the afternoon, just as the sun's starting to get weak, so when it's at maximum temperature, so I can get that humidity out of here. And it's been working quite well. I'll probably adjust it in the summer when the humidity gets worse and I'll need to have more ventilation. Also when the temperatures get quite high, I might even put a thermostatic switch so it doesn't get too hot and it can actually come on when it gets really warm, instead of me constantly putting it on manually. But that's been working quite well. There's not been as much condensation, and most of the winter has actually been really good. We've had very little condensation in this conservatory, so that's actually worked quite well. I'm quite happy with that. But over winter we did have a couple of cold spells. -15, it was the coldest it got to outside, and that was really quite cold, and so the heating system struggled. That night I had to put my dehumidifier in here just to provide some extra heat, because I didn't have any extra heaters. The dehumidifier was the best thing I had. And I also set up the fan in a position so it was blowing heat against the radiator, so that it would draw out the heat a little bit faster and make the radiator more efficient. The centre of the room, where the thermometer is down there, got down to about 6 to 8 degrees. Probably around the edges of the room it was getting close to freezing, so it was a bit cold, but fortunately it didn't drop down to freezing. But there are a couple of cold spots, and I've been making the most of them. So one of them is actually around here. There's a slight gap in the conservatory, and cold air comes through here. There was a very small amount of ice build up at one point, but I've been using this for plants that need a bit of cold dormancy. It's been quite handy having this cold spot here. I might seal this up in the future just to make it more economical to heat the place, but it's actually been quite useful having that cold spot, because there's been a couple of plants I've wanted to keep colder. So this is my chives here. The chives, they don't look very good at the moment because they're basically dormant. It's over winter, chives often go dormant or completely lose their leaves. So I had that in the colder spot just to give it its dormant period so it will grow better over summer. If chives grow too long without dormancy, then they tend to weaken. So that's the only real temperate plant. All the other plants are subtropical. I haven't got any of my plants that don't like it too cold in here. So there's plants like begonias and phalaenopsis orchids and my other orchids. I haven't got them in here because I think 8 or 10 degrees is a bit cold for them. So it's just been the subtropical plants. They don't mind it a little bit colder, about 10 degrees. I've had them in here and they've done quite well. But it's now time to bring up the temperature and bring the plants back into growth. So most of these plants have been pretty dormant because even recently with the highest temperatures in the springtime, the only time it's been getting warmer than what the heating's set at is on a sunny day, which is a little bit rare here in Scotland. But occasionally it has got up to 25 degrees Celsius, which has been good when we had a couple of sunny afternoons on a milder day. But I'd like to bring the temperature up quite a bit now to get all these plants back into growth. We've got things like my rubber plant here, which has been completely dormant. My frangipani, which has lost all its leaves, as I expected. Also, I've got my avocado, which hasn't grown at all, but it's just starting to show some signs of coming out of dormancy. There's a little bit of new growth on there, and once they up the temperatures, this will spring back into growth with no problem. And there's a few other plants in here which are just going to come into growth soon, such as I've got a few gingers and things like that which should start growing soon. Now some of the plants are looking a little bit unhappy at the moment. This is the time of year when the plants look their worst. They've gone through several months of dark conditions, 6 months of not good light levels and 3 months of bad temperatures, and that's why some of them are looking a little bit sorry for themselves, such as things as my poinsettia here, which has lost a lot of its lower leaves. And you can see here, this is one plant that's going to come out of dormancy and look really good soon. This is my bougainvillea. It's looking completely bare, it's lost its leaves. Basically, if the temperatures go low on this, it loses its leaves. I thought it might survive without going deciduous, but it did go deciduous, but that's not a problem, it's just something it does when it's cold. And there's actually a little bit of new growth just starting. I've kept this very dry on purpose because I don't want this to grow over the cold months, but it's just started to come into growth, so it's just really eager to get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this off, and the reason being I want it to have one strong branch that grows up and I can train it along here. So I'll just go ahead and do that now. Last year it grew this new branch from quite low down, and it was a very strong branch, and also most of the new growth is appearing up there. So that's what I'm going to keep. Basically last year when I bought it, it only grew to it was only about this size, and then it grew these side branches, grew that long tall section, and it grew a little bit at the end there. It also flowered very well last year, but I'd like to have that one long section. So what I'm going to do is cut it off just here and leave that long section. It might look a bit funny, a bit odd, but in the long term this is going to be really beneficial for me to be able to train it into the wall section so that it can grow along the wall. So when it comes to the temperature of the conservatory, as I say, there's a few different temperature zones. So towards the middle, it keeps the temperature of that thermometer. The cold spot I mentioned over there, 2 or 3 degrees Celsius warmer on top of the grow box, although I've not put anything there that particularly needs a lot of warmth apart from my small bonsai there. That bonsai is Ficus benjaminus, that likes a little bit more warmth, but the jade plants up there, they didn't need that extra warmth. I also have plants towards the radiator, like the poinsettias here. I either have them higher up or I have them quite close to the radiator for that extra heat. That again, probably 3 or 4 degrees warmer, just a little bit of extra temperature. And then the coldest spots are probably the corners, or right next to the edge. So the corners, I haven't really put any plants in, or if there are plants like this frangipani, it's not in active growth, it's completely dormant, so that's not an issue. And the other corner, there's not really any plants at all apart from some clivia, but they don't mind the cold temperatures, so that's why they're towards that corner. And also I've got several young plants there which are temperate plants, so like sweet peas and leeks, so that they're fine in that section. So when it comes to bringing it into growth now, all the plants, and increasing the temperature, this is for tropical plants or subtropical plants, and I want it to be similar temperatures to what they get in their climate, but I can't go quite as warm as that because the problem is the heating would be too much. In a true tropical climate, temperatures at night around 25 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees in the day. I won't be able to keep it that stable or that warm. But at night time, I'm probably going to increase the temperature to about 18 degrees, maybe 20 degrees as a minimum, eventually when it warms up a bit more. For now, I'm just going to increase it to 16 and then increase it maybe 1 degree every month until we get up to 20. Over summer, I'll keep this always at 20, never any colder. During the daytime, I'll set the heating so it's around 22 degrees Might put it up to 25, 26 in the summer. But to be honest, in the summertime, once the sun comes around, it's going to naturally get up to 30 or 40 degrees in here anyway, and the heating won't really be coming on much. Also at night time, this place holds the temperature quite well once summer arrives. Because there's this big concrete wall here, which is part of the house, and the house is cast concrete with render on top. This holds quite a lot of heat, and late at night the sun bakes this wall right till about 10 p.m. We have very long days here in summer, so the sun sets around 10 o'clock. Or just a bit after 10 o'clock. So this gets a lot of heat, this absorbs a lot of heat, and that just radiates heat all night. And because the sun then rises again at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's not a very long period when it's dark, so it can hold the heat quite well. And it does naturally keep around 20 in here at night, no problem, especially during the midsummer months. So along with increasing the temperatures to get them into growth, I'm also going to start feeding the plants. None of these plants have been fed since around about November or maybe even October time, so it's been several months, and a lot of them have been kept quite dry, especially plants like the frangipani, which can be quite susceptible to rot and is completely deciduous at the moment. I've kept that almost completely dry just to make sure it doesn't rot. And it's the same with the bougainvillea and several of my succulent plants. But now it's warming up, I'm going to give them regular waterings, just a little bit of water to begin with until they start showing some signs of growth. Once they actually do start growing, then I can do regular watering, regular feeding, and they'll just grow rapidly, especially with the warmer temperatures. So I think I'd like to make a few more adjustments to this conservatory in the future. I think we need a bit better insulation in winter, so I don't have to have such high heating costs, and also so if there's a really cold spell again, I don't need to worry about the radiator not being powerful enough. So I'm pondering maybe insulating some of these lower sections. The windows, they're not actually too badly insulated, but the little white walls down here, they're solid PVC, about 2 centimeters thick, but you can really feel the cold on them. They're not insulated that well, and they are recessed, so I was thinking I might just put some thin insulation on there, or even some kind of benches along the bottom here to put my plants on. If they're not on the ground, they'll be a bit warmer. Also, that gives me storage space underneath, and it brings them up and lets them have more light. Where they are at the moment, such as my hibiscus here, which is not looking the greatest because it's been through a whole winter, they're quite shaded down there. If they were brought up more to the window height level, then they'd be doing a lot better. So I'm definitely thinking at some point this summer I might build some benching around here, some kind of like low table with storage underneath so I can put my plants on that. At the same time, insulate those walls so there's less cold coming in. And then the other option I was thinking is probably some kind of blind or thermal insulation for the top. I might see what there is on the market, but I think if I had a thermal screen, so like a silver reflective foil with thin insulation that rolls up, that could slide down at night time and insulate the plants, and then I could slide that back in the daytime to let the light in. That would make a big difference. There's probably a lot of heat that gets out of this. This is twin wall PVC, so it's actually quite thick between the two layers, so I think it's not too bad. It's not vacuum sealed anymore, as you can see there's quite a bit of moisture coming in, but it's not as bad as the walls, I don't think. It does feel cool, but it never felt really cold. I had too much condensation on it, but definitely this could do with some better insulation because it's a very big space and it's just twin wall polycarbonate, so there's a lot of heat loss through that. So I think if I had some sort of a cover over there, that would certainly help. That's something to think about in the future, and possibly even some better blinds. These are just the blinds that came with the conservatory. They're very thin, they don't really provide any kind of thermal insulation. It's just for privacy or to keep the light out when it's too sunny. If I could get some foil lined blinds at some point, ideally automatic so I don't have to put them down every night. That's something else I was thinking I might do in the future. That would help hugely with the insulation as well, and I could probably keep this place nice and warm at night with just a tiny bit of insulation. Because once this wall at the back here is up to temperature, this can hold an awful lot of heat. And certainly in summer, when the sun's shining on it, it does the job perfectly fine. But in the winter, when there's not enough sun heating this place up, it really does get quite cold, and the heating has to be working quite hard to warm up the conservatory. Finally, the other upgrade I'd like to do in the future, when the budget allows, is put some grow lights in here. At the moment we have 6 months of pretty bad light here. Because of how the roof is situated and because I'm in, so far north in Scotland, we have 6 months of really quite bad light, 6 months of good light. If I could extend the season slightly with some grow lamps, so I can have some better lighting, that would be ideal. And with these nice wide beams here, I could definitely put some kind of strip grow lights. So that's something I'm thinking of doing in the winter maybe, putting some grow lights up here just for some supplemental light. I probably won't have high temperatures and high light levels in winter just because the electricity bills would be extortionate and the carbon emissions would be high. But just some lighting and some heating so the plants don't get too sickly. I could maybe keep my Phalaenopsis orchid or some of my other plants that like some higher temperatures in here, because at the moment, at winter, I just have to keep them inside the house because it's too cold for them. So that's all for this update on the conservatory. Most of the plants, let's say, are looking a little bit bad at the moment because it's the end of the winter. They've gone through several months of darkness, but they'll be starting to come into growth soon, and they'll be looking much better in a few months' time.